Okay, that's the end of the countdown.
Okay.
That didn't seem to be working very well tonight.
Okay.
A lot of things don't seem to be working very well tonight. Anyway, here we are. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone, and I'm here with my friend, the host of Around the World with Dee and Friends, Dee Pierce. Hello,
Happy,
Dee.
happy to be here.
Well, thank you very much. Happy to have you here.
Thank you.
So, our topics are the budget resolution that was passed by the House, by the Republican House. I'm trying to close this. Okay. And our second topic is Europe's sound and fury at the change or the pivot in U.S. foreign policy. And our third topic is what happened at the Hezbollah funeral in Lebanon.
Right.
Very, very interesting stuff. Very, very interesting. And in that respect, we'll go over an article by Pepe Escobar.
Okay, now I'm sharing right now, so
Okay,
if
I'll
you
share
could please
too.
share. It's so important to share. Let everybody know you're live.
Right, I agree. Especially since we've been late. Sharing is extremely important at this point.
Sharing is caring.
And caring is sharing.
Yes.
Okay, so there we are.
Okay, I'm gonna go over to X2 and make sure.
Thank you.
Okay, you see people coming in?
Yeah, a few
Oh,
people
that's good.
here. A little more than a few, several.
Oh, good.
So, but nobody has announced themselves as yet.
I know.
So we can't say hello.
Well, hello to the people
Who are coming in? They're probably coming in from Twitter.
yes.
Coming in from Elon Land.
Oh, it's always something.
I am going to share the screen now with the first of our pieces for tonight. It's from
Okay.
the American Prospect. The author is the editor in chief, that is to say, Dave Dayen,
Okay.
otherwise known as D Day. His famous old style nom de plume. And this piece is called House Republicans Squeak Through Budget Resolution. But there is a lot more work to do and no consensus yet. And this is by uh, um, um, David Dayen, February 26th, 2025. And here's a picture of Speaker of the House, that is to say, Mike Johnson, getting listened to by some press corps people, including the one I recognize there is Manu Raju.
Mm-hmm.
And there is House Speaker Mike Johnson makes a statement to reporters after the House passed the budget resolution at the U.S. Capitol February 25th, 2025. And we talked about that also on Dee's show last night. So this is a later article, though, with more facts and more opinions. After sending members home for the night, House Republicans called them back on Tuesday and secured passage of an expansive resolution on the budget that includes virtually the entire Trump agenda. You know, Trump's big, bold, and beautiful bill. In other words, the budget resolution was calling for that bill, but it wasn't the bill itself. because they're going through a reconciliation process. So they do a resolution first, then they pass it on to the Senate that does a resolution reconciling the House and the Senate. Then they send that over to the House. It becomes a bill. Then it gets a vote. Okay, and if they pass it, it goes again up to the Senate and then to the president for a final signature if they stick with the bill. Obviously, there can be many changes, many slips between the cup and the lip. The final vote was 217 to 215. That's 432 members, okay, who voted. One vote on the no side was a Republican. All but one Republican, Representative Thomas Massey, who's a Republican from Kentucky, voting for the resolution, and 214 Democrats who voted against the resolution along with him. Now, 217 plus 215 is 432, so there are 3 vacant seats. So the whole House was voting in this instance. And if you don't count Thomas Massey, the vote was 217 to 214 Democrats. So the Democrats were all there and voting for this. Okay, the resolution sets a path for $4.5 trillion in tax cuts over the next 10 years, partially offset by at least $2 trillion in spending cuts. So the resolution builds in a deficit of $2.5 trillion. $2.5 trillion over 10 years. So that's $250 billion a year. But that's just for the tax cut part of it. Okay, since it's a general spending bill, it turns out that the deficits that are built into this bill are $1.9 trillion a year, or $19 trillion over 10 years. That's probably good news for the economy, because given the trade deficit we have, the current account deficit, we probably need deficits of that side for an economy to continue in good shape. Anyway, that tiniest of margins carried out, which is the easy part of the reconciliation package, and it isn't even done. In fact, the budget resolution from the House is thought to be dead on arrival in the Senate. Passage of the resolution represents a victory for House Speaker Mike Johnson, the Republican Louisiana, especially as it looked bleak earlier on Tuesday. Johnson was able to flip several conservative House members to advance the measure, and he needed everyone after several House Democrats who had missed votes early in the day showed up for the evening. Specifically, Representative Brittany Pedersen of Colorado showed up 3 weeks after giving birth. That's a strong lady. Johnson was able to corral the votes mainly because a budget resolution is so indistinct. The resolution sets top line members, numbers, not members, numbers, to instruct the various committees, which will then come back with the specifics Throughout the day, House Republicans insisted that the proposed cuts didn't mean what they clearly meant because they were just instructions for committees that could be carried out in any manner. In reality, when the Agricultural Committee is told to find 230 billion in cuts, 23 billion a year, that is, that's really only one thing that could mean: a rollback of the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, food stamps, which helps feed poor people. Unless the Ag Committee decides randomly to wipe out the lion's share of U.S. agricultural assistance, they're going to go after food stamps, as was laid out in the menu of budget options earlier this year.
They're looking to starve people to death.
Starve the poor people to death so you don't have to worry about them. And also so the Republicans can create more and more and more poor people. Okay, but they won't have to be adding those poor people to these poor people because they will have starved out the other poor people already. I guess that's what they have in mind. But
Sounds like that's what they have in mind. It's just so horrific.
yes, it is horrific. Likewise, the Energy and Commerce Committee was instructed to make 880 billion in cuts.
Mm.
And there's really no way to do that without massive cuts to Medicaid, the health insurance program for over 70 million poor Americans. Being able to deny reality in the budget resolution is why every frontline Republican in the swing seat quickly agreed to the package, which would also spend about 200 billion over 10 years on border security and mass deportations, while boosting the military budget by about 100 billion. Here's the peacemaker, Trump, and they want to boost the military budget by about 100 billion. I guess he doesn't expect a peace dividend, does he? When the Medicaid and food stamp cuts are specific and the impact clear, they will have a harder time pretending that the changes won't harm their constituents. Yes, they will, but of course, what has to happen before then is that the Senate has to agree on the budget resolution or has to formulate a budget resolution through reconciliation that takes into account what the House wants and what the Senate wants. Then it has to send that back to the House. Then the House has to come up with a bill based on the reconciliation. And that's when it will become specific about the Medicaid and food stamp cuts. Meanwhile, the holdouts are all conservatives who wanted more cuts.
How sick.
It is, isn't it sick? But Thomas Massey correctly pointed out that the budget bill would increase deficits. Yes, if I'm correct, by 19 trillion over 10 years. Which I have to say, I consider that number to be good news. I'm sure that I'm not going to agree with the specifics, okay, but the number itself of 19 trillion over 10 years is a good part of what we need in terms of deficits.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why do I say that? I say that because when the government has a deficit, that's a non-government sector surplus. And the surplus is exactly equal to the size of the deficit. Okay, now, the non-government sector includes the foreign sector and the private sector. Now, there are going to be some trade deficits sending money to the private sector, but very much of that particular deficit will become a surplus for the private sector, in this country. So those Republicans who are angry at this bill because the deficits are so large are taking the position that they want to lower the net financial assets that are going to be going out to the private sector. That's the position they're taking. Now, they don't know it because they don't understand sectoral financial balances, which are very simple to understand, but they're frankly just ignorant. They just don't understand that.
No.
And the ignorance could be cleared up by them reading just one book. But of course, they're too busy for that.
That's true.
In fact, they don't even have to read just a book. There are numerous articles that make this point, but they'd probably be more comfortable reading a book. And that book is by Stephanie Kelton. And the name of it is The Deficit Myth. And it's a bestseller in the economics category. Yet, all these people in Congress to whom this book is absolutely essential don't appear to have read it.
It's so ridiculous. They have a job and they don't want to know anything about the truth about economics.
Now, they have a job. A lot of that job is bound up with economics, and these folks refuse to do their homework.
Mm-hmm.
House Budget Committee Chair Jody Arrington, Republican of Texas, had already sought to placate conservatives in his committee by creating incentives for additional budget cuts. If $2.5 trillion in cuts is found, for example, the tax cuts can go up to $5 trillion. However, if Republicans only reach $1.5 trillion in cuts, the tax cuts would have to fall to $4 trillion. Okay. Already, House Ways and Means Committee Chair Jason Smith has said that a net $4.5 trillion in tax cuts is insufficient to make the 2017 Trump tax cuts permanent, while also adding all the tax promises he made on the campaign trail last year.
Mm.
In fact, this will be a big sticking point with the Senate. They're going to produce a budget resolution. Oh, they passed a budget resolution actually last week, and that's completely different. The Senate preferred a two-bill strategy that included just the immigration and defense spending, offset mostly by energy measures, while saving the tax cuts for a second bill. The House bitterly opposed that, believing they will never have the ability to get two reconciliation votes through in one session of the legislature. Now, why is it important to have two reconciliation votes? Because if they have reconciliation votes, then they don't have to worry about the filibuster, because it requires only a majority vote to pass a reconciliation bill. But it requires 60 votes to get rid of the filibuster, so you can vote on a bill if it's not a reconciliation bill. Anyway, passing such a resolution gives the House the upper hand in the one bill versus two bill debate. But permanent passage of the tax cuts is a deal breaker for the Senate and Budget Committee Chair Senator Lindsey Graham. Clearly teed up his skinny budget resolution to tuck in larger military spending.
He's so disgusting.
I know he is. He's such a creepy, crawly thing, isn't he?
He is.
The Senate will change the budget resolution significantly. Quote, a major overhaul, unquote, Lindsey Graham told the Wall Street Journal, and send it back to the House. Both chambers must pass the same resolution to continue work on the reconciliation bill. If that finally happens, and the success of the House on Tuesday suggests it may eventually, if only because Republicans in the rank and file will agree to advance the process forward, then every single detail of a massive bill, the kind of thing that takes an entire legislative session to work out, would have to be hammered out. That includes how to contour Medicaid and food stamps cuts to appease moderates, where to find other available cuts, what level to bring in
Mhm.
military spending at, and how to cram in all the tax questions, including expensive changes to the state and local tax deduction cap favored by the Republicans in high tax states, a graduated corporate income tax that favors domestic um, 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 uh, manufacturing, as well as the no tax on tips, overtime, and other policies supported by President Trump. Meanwhile, almost none of this is going to be worked on over the next 3 weeks because there's a March 14th deadline to extend the government funding. And I think there's a fair amount of agreement that the way they're going to extend the government funding for this fiscal year is by passing a continuing resolution. So that's what they're going to be trying to be doing from now to March 14th. There's probably going to be some fighting about that because the budgetary conservatives won't like the extension of funding, of government funding. And if some of the Republicans uh, uh, should attach some funny stuff to the CR, which doesn't agree with Democratic points of view, then the CR may never pass the House. Even the extension of funding, may not pass the House. Okay, because they'll have to have the support of the Democrats in order to increase the debt limit, in order to extend the funding. So they need the support of the Democrats for that, because the conservatives on the Republican side aren't going to vote to increase the debt limit. So they're going to need some Democratic support for that. Anyway, Republicans, going on with the article, have little chance of passing that on their own, as their hard right wants tangible cuts as a down payment on the future budget. Democrats have shown no inclination to cooperate with votes that would be needed, not while Elon Musk is unilaterally canceling funding on his own whim. They want ironclad guarantees that anything they agree to will actually be spent for the rest of the fiscal year, something that is almost impossible for someone as mendacious as Trump to give them. Very good judgment. Okay. A government shutdown would complicate the budget debate, with Trump taking on the entirety of the state. He'll be unable to escape the blame for something like that, combined with already fading economic fortunes, will further chip away at his economic approval. Of course, this will only be at the cost of much suffering on the part of the people, who won't be seeing much flow from the government unless the funding extension is passed, and quickly. It also gives more time for Democrats to hammer away at the painful cuts that make some Republicans uncomfortable, especially in those areas with large numbers, of working poor. And where are those areas? Well, they're disproportionately in red states
Mm-hmm.
and in red congressional districts. Uh-oh, I see a sweep coming up. The expectation should be that Republicans iron out their differences, as the House did on the resolution, budget resolution. But there's a very long way to go to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So far, nothing meaningful has actually passed. If it takes driving the length of the field to get the president's signature, right now, Republicans are still back at their own 15-yard line after barely eking out a first down. Football analogy by Dave. Uh, I do have to add one other thing to this, and that is that if they're going to be busy until March 14th just to pass a funding extension, and if that goes a week or two beyond and creates a shutdown crisis for that time, something important happens on April 1st, and that is uh, two congressional seats are up in for special elections in Florida. The Mike Waltz seat and the Matt Gaetz seat. They both are in red districts, but people in red districts are currently very angry at what's going on with Elon Musk and all the governmental cuts. So the Republicans have a chance to lose those two seats. That would create a situation where instead of 214 Democrats, there would then be 216 Democrats. And the Republicans would have only one vote to spare to pass anything. And of course, Thomas Massie voted against, this budget resolution. When it comes down to the final bill, he is very likely to want to vote against that as well. And then there are other Republican conservatives who won't be able to stomach, first of all, the deficits in the bill they're trying to pass. And there are others who won't be able to stomach the Medicaid cuts and the food stamp cuts. So if the Democrats win those two seats on April 1st, they'll probably be sworn in by May 1st or something like that. Okay, then it's going to be very hard for the Republicans to pass the kind of budget that we see implied here in this particular resolution. The other thing to point out is there's another special election coming up. It'll probably be coming up in June, and maybe the swearing in will be in the summertime. And this is for a third vacant seat in New York State. It's the Elise Stefanik seat, because she has gone to the UN, of course. That's a purple district. And the Democrats might easily be able to take that one. Anyway, if they take all three of the open seats, they will have the majority in the House of Representatives, 218 to 217. And our friend, Speaker Mike Johnson, will be gone. He will no longer be Speaker. And Trump will no longer have control of the House.
That would be a good thing.
That would be a good thing, but that is what is shaping up. So this is all very interesting in terms of what is likely to happen here. So should we check on comments?
Sure.
Okay, what we've got here is Judamni William. Hello.
Hello.
Said good night, looking forward. Evelina Pont is here and she waves. Steve Wolfbrand says hello, everybody. Hello, Steve. Nice to see you here. Oh, there's one thing. Okay, I don't see Friar Steve here yet. If Friar Steve does come in, though, I am going to ration his comments to 5.
Okay. And basically just summarize because it takes too much time.
It takes entirely too much time. Okay, so all comments over 5 that he makes will just be ignored.
Okay.
So that's what we will do to restore to ourselves control of the course of the video. I think that's fair.
I think it's fair. More than fair.
Okay, so that's what we'll do. So here's our second piece of the night. This is a piece by Alistair Crook, and I'm going to put it up for you, D.
Okay.
It's up there now.
Righty. Alistair Crook. America as Republic, not as Empire. Europe's sound and fury, in quote, after jaw-dropping pivots in U.S. policy. It was written February 26.
That's right.
Trump does not buy into the primary lie intended as the glue which holds their entire EU geopolitical structure together. The bits are falling into a distinct pattern, a pre-prepared pattern. Defense Secretary Hegseth at the Munich Security Conference gave us 4 no's. No to Ukraine and NATO. No to a return to pre-2014 borders. No to Article 5 peacekeeper backstops. And no to U.S. troops in Ukraine. And in a final flourish, he added that U.S. troops in Europe are not forever, and even placed a question mark over the continuity of NATO. Pretty plain speaking, the U.S. clearly is cutting away from Ukraine, and they intend to normalize relations with Russia. Then Vice President Vance threw his firecracker amongst the gathered Euro elites. He said that the elites had retreated from, quote, shared democratic values. They were overly reliant on repressing and censoring their peoples, prone to locking them up. And above all, he exaggerated the European cordon sanitaire firewall by which European parties outside the center-left are deemed non grata politically. It's a fake, quote, threat, he suggested. Of what are you really so frightened? Or what are you so frightened? Have you so little confidence in your, quote, democracy?
Okay, just a thought here. Yes, okay, I think the Europeans do have repression and censorship kinds of problems, okay, in their state. But I have to wonder what is going on with the Washington Post. Jeff Bezos. He is told, okay, his editorial staff, that they have to focus on individual values, on libertarian values, and on free market consideration.
Mm-hmm.
So the head of the editorial staff resigned, and I understand some other people are resigning, okay, as well. Okay, so in other words, our government perhaps doesn't have to directly censor people. All it has to do is ask the oligarchs who are associated with it, such as Musk and Bezos, to censor people using their platforms. So the censorship occurs at a different level. So Vice President Vance won't have to accuse, okay, our own country of censoring, okay, and repressing people, because they will already have done that at a different level.
Interesting.
Anyway, go on.
The U.S., he implied, will no longer support Europe if it continues to suppress political constituencies, arrest citizens for speech offenses, and particularly cancel elections as was done recently in Romania. Quote, if you're running in fear of your own voters, Vance said, there's nothing America can do for you. Ouch. Vance had hit them where it hurts. It is difficult to say what specifically most triggered the catonic European breakdown. Was it the fear of the US and Russia joining together as a major power nexus, thus stripping Europe forever from ever again being able glided along on the back of American power through this specious notion that any European state must have exceptional access to the Washington ear? Or was it the ending of the Ukraine Zelensky cult, which was so prized among the Euro elite as the quote glue around which a folk's European unity and identity could be enforced? Both probably contributed to the fury. That the US would, in essence, leave Europe to their own delusions would be a calamitous event for the Brussels technocracy. Many may lazily assume that the US double axe at Munich was just another example of the well-known Trumpian fondness for dropping, quote, wacky initiatives intended to both shock and kick over frozen paradigms. The Munich speeches did exactly that all right, yet that does not make them accidental, but rather parts that fit into a bigger picture. It is clear now that the Trump blitzkrieg across the American administration state could not have been mounted unless carefully pre-planned and prepared over the last 4 years. Trump's flurry of presidential executive orders at the outset of the presidency were not whimsical. Leading U.S. constitutional lawyer Jonathan Turley and other lawyers say that the orders were well drafted legally and with a clear understanding that legal challenges would ensue. What's more, the Trump team welcomed those challenges. What is going on? The newly confirmed head of the Office of Budget, OMB, Russ Voigt, says his office will become the quote on-off switch for all executive expenditures under the new executive orders. Voigt calls the resulting whirlpool the application of constitutional radicalism, and Trump has now issued the executive order that reinstates the primacy of the executive as the controlling mechanism of government.
Okay, just to say,
Crazy.
okay, just a couple of things about that particular paragraph. The OMB, okay, is the department that the Doge agency is in.
Mm,
Okay, the part of the OMB that became the Doge agency, it was something called the Digital Service.
mhm.
Okay, that's not exactly right, but it had a title like that. Okay, when Trump came in, he he reorganized that part, okay, of OMB, uh, basically by giving it uh, a new name. And that name, okay, is Doge. So that's where Doge actually came from.
Okay.
So it's part, okay, of the OMB. When he says that the Office of Management and Budget will become the on-off switch for all executive expenditure, what he's saying is uh, that Doge is going to be the on-off switch.
Mm,
That's what that uh, actually means. Okay, and then the final statement of the paragraph, and Trump has now issued the executive order that reinstates the primacy of the executive, okay, as the controlling mechanism, okay, of government. Now, other than in time of war, okay, and even then, we have not had the primacy of the executive as the controlling mechanism, okay, of government.
No.
It was always Congress that passed up to the laws, and Congress that had to determine whether spending and taxing was going to go on. It was up to the president to implement what Congress had said. Now, sometimes presidents were dominant in Congress and they can get everything they want up through. But Trump is not that strong in Congress yet, so he resorts to executive orders. Okay, now there's nothing wrong with executive orders, but they cannot shut down agencies. They cannot impound spending. That is against the Budget Control and Impoundment Act passed by Congress in 1974. And it's also against the statement of the legislative power in Article 1 of the Constitution.
Mm.
Okay, please go on.
Okay. What that who was in OMB in Trump '01 is carefully selecting the ground for all-out financial war on the deep state. It will be fought out firstly at the Supreme Court, which the Trump team expects confidently to win. Trump has the 6-3 conservative majority. The new regime will then be applied across all agencies and departments of state. Expect shrieks of pain.
Okay, I have to add here also the big question. There's no question Trump has a 6-3 conservative vote. The question is, does he have a 6-3 Trump vote?
True.
Those
Does
two
he?
things are not the same thing. True conservatives, if these are true conservatives, will insist on the separation of powers. And they will not allow Trump to take over the functions of the legislature. The power of the purse is central to the authority of Congress.
Mm-hmm.
The question here is going to be whether the Supreme Court will give some of the power of the purse to Trump.
Right.
If they do so, that will be clearly unconstitutional. But it won't be the first time the Supreme Court has done things that are clearly unconstitutional, specifically the presidential immunity decision. Okay, that the Supreme Court just came forth with is certainly in conflict with the explicit wording of the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
So this Supreme Court might do the same thing here. On the other hand, this might be too much for Roberts and for Coney Barrett to swallow. If so, there will be a 5-4 majority. It won't be either liberal or conservative. Okay. It will be a majority defending the separation of powers. We do not know how this is going to work out yet.
No, you don't. The point here is that the administrative state, aloof from executive control, has taken to itself prerogatives such as immunity to dismissal and then self-awarded authority to shape policy, creating a dual state system run by unelected technocrats which, when implanted in departments such as Justice and the Pentagon, have evolved into the American deep state. Article 2 of the Constitution, however, says very bluntly, executive power shall be vested in the U.S. President, with no ifs or buts at all. Trump intends for his administration to recover that lost executive power. It was, in fact, lost long ago. Trump is reclaiming, too, the executive's right to dismiss servants of the state and to switch off wasteful expenditure at his discretion as part of a unitary executive prerequisite.
Okay, so there's something here that's also very subtle. The administrative state, in many of its departments, was not aloof from control by the executive. In fact, the administrative state was a tool of executive control. What Congress would do is to outline, its legislation in very general terms, and then it would let the people inside of the administrative state, the so-called experts, basically write the rules for application of legislation. Now, granting that power to the bureaucrats in the administrative state was a way to increase control of the executive. Alistair Crook, however, is seeing it as something, that got away from the executive.
Okay.
Well, maybe it got away from Trump in his first administration, but from the other presidents before him, the administrative state was a means for the president to have greater control over what was going on, because there was no requirement for Congress to write very specific legislation. Now, the Supreme Court recently made a ruling which tore a hole in the administrative state. The court ruled to limit the rulemaking power, of the administrative state, and to tell Congress that it had to write laws in a very, very specific way, which many think is beyond the expertise of Congress. And it may be beyond the expertise of Congress, but that really doesn't matter because Congress can hire those experts, and have the experts in-house. So ultimately, Congress could take on the function of writing laws very, very specifically.
Right.
Okay, that can be done. But what I'm saying is that decision of the Supreme Court was by way of telling Congress, take back your legislative power. You've been giving up your legislative power to the executive. Take it back and take control. So that decision can be looked on as a defense of separation of powers. So the question is, will the desire to defend separation of powers be dominant here in this particular new context where Trump is trying to take over the power of the purse to some degree? Okay, please go on.
Okay. Of course, the administrative state is fighting back. Turley's article is headlined, "They are taking away everything we have. Democrats and unions launch existential fight." Their aim has been to cripple the Trump initiative through using politicized judges to issue restraint orders. Many many
Okay,
main
so he views the judges
Mhm.
as people, who are politicized. But I think most people here in the United States do not view them as judges, who are politicized. they view them as judges who are upholding the law as it now stands. So he has a particular bias on these issues.
Okay.
He thinks that judges who are going to defend things like the NLRB and the ability of the NLRB to function and control the corporations, that is somehow politicized. Okay, but that is his particular bias.
Hmm.
I don't think I would view it as
Right. You just
judges, who are politicized.
no, they're just trying to follow what the laws are.
That's what I think. Yeah, please go on.
Many mainstream lawyers believe Trump's unitary executive claim to be illegal. The question is whether Congress can stand up agencies designed to act independently of the president. And how does that square with the separation of powers and Article 2 that vests unqualified executive power with one sole elected official, the president?
Okay, I agree with that particular point. It's one of the paradoxes inside of the Constitution, okay, is written. Uh, it does vest unqualified executive power uh, with respect to the president.
Hmm.
But Congress has legislated all kinds of agencies which have a measure of independence from the president.
Hmm.
And years of precedent by the Supreme Court has upheld uh, uh, legislation by Congress that has done that. So the question is, what is this Supreme Court going to decide? A commentary by most people suggests that there is a majority on the Supreme Court in favor of the unitary executive notion. There didn't used to be a majority, but there is now.
Mm.
So the question is, will they take the unitary executive claim to its extreme, or will they rely on the separation of powers doctrine, which, of course, would clearly say that the power of the purse belongs, to Congress?
Hmm.
If Article 2 says that we vest unqualified executive power in one sole official, the President of the United States, Article 1 says we vest the power of the purse, the unqualified power of the purse in the Congress. So this is a conflict between two unqualified powers,
Hmm.
both fundamental to the Constitution. It should be noted, however, that when the Republic was founded, that the reason why Article 1 outlines the power of Congress was because the people who started the United States as a republic had in mind that even though the three branches were going to be co-equal, first among the co-equal branches was going to be Congress. That it is why it is in Article 1.
Hmm.
Anyway, please go on.
How did the Democrats not see this coming? Lawyer Robert Barnes essentially says that the Blitzkrieg was, quote, exceptionally well planned and had been discussed in Trump circles since late 2020. The latter team had emerged from within a generational and cultural shift in the U.S. This latter had given rise to a libertarian, populist wing with working class roots who often had served in the military, yet had come to despise the neocon lies, especially those of 9/11, that brought endless wars. They were animated more by the old John Adams adage that, quote, America should go abroad in search of monsters to slay. In short, they were not part of the WASP Anglo world. They came from a different culture that harked back to the theme of America as republic, not as empire. This is what you see with Vance and Hegseth, a reversion to the Republican precept that the U.S. should not become involved in European wars. Ukraine is not America's war.
So this paragraph is very, very interesting. But we have to say, in response to this paragraph, that who founded America uh, as a republic? It was founded by the WASPs and by the Anglos.
Mm-hmm.
They were the ones who constituted a republic. The later evolution, to empire, I don't know whether it was particularly associated with the Anglos, or associated with the immigrants. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
I would put it in any particular ethnic sort of camp.
Right.
But the idea that the original republic was not, an Anglo republic is, simply not culturally accurate, or culturally acceptable. Please go on.
Okay. The deep state, it seems, were not paying attention to what a posse of populist outliers tucked away from the rare field beltway talking shop were up to. They, the outliers, were planning a concerted attack on the federal expenditure spigot, identified as the weak spot about which a constitutional challenge could be mounted that would derail in its entirety the expenditures of the deep state. It seems that one aspect to the surprise has been the Trump team's discipline, no leaks. And secondly, that those involved in the planning are not drawn from the preemptive Anglosphere, but rather from a strand of society that was offended by the Iraq War and which blames the Anglosphere for ruining quote, America. So Vance's speech at Munich was not disruptive, merely for the sake of being disruptive. He was, in fact, encouraging the audience to recall early Republican values. This was what is meant by his complaint that Europe had turned away from, quote, our shared values, i.e., the values that animated Americans seek an escape from the tyranny, prejudices, and corruption of the old world. Vance was, quite politely, chiding the Euro elites for blacksliding to old European vices.
I think that paragraph is extremely interesting too. The comment I would make about that is that his idea with respect to shared values that animated Americans seeking escape from the tyranny, prejudices, and the corruption of the old world,
Mm-hmm.
that needs to be applied to domestic politics here in America as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we're seeing here in domestic politics, is tyranny and prejudices, and corruption. It is full of our domestic politics right now,
Oh, yes, it is.
and is full of the activities of Doge.
Mm-hmm.
Full of the activities of Doge. There are many commentaries on the web that are pointing out the conflicts of interest inherent in all of Doge's actions right now. Please go on.
Vance implicitly was hinting, too, that European conservative libertarians should emulate Trump and act to slough off their, quote, administrative states and recover control over executive power. Tear down the firewalls, he advised. Why? Because he likely views the, quote, Brussels technocratic state as nothing other than a pure offshoot to the American deep state, and therefore very likely to try to torpedo and sink Trump's initiative to normalize relations with Moscow. If these were Vance's instincts, he was right. Macron also immediately summoned an emergency meeting of the War Party in Paris to consider how to frustrate the American initiative. It failed, however, descending reportedly into quarreling and acrimony. It transpired that Europe could not gather a, quote, sharp end military force greater than 20,000 to 30,000 men.
Yes.
Schultz objected in principle to their involvement. Poland demurred as a close neighbor of Ukraine, and Italy stayed silent. Starmer, however, after Munich, immediately rang Zelensky to say that Britain saw Ukraine to be on an irrevocable path to NATO membership, thus directly contradicting U.S. policy and with no support from other states. Trump will not forget this, nor will he forget Britain's former role in supporting the Russiagate slur during his first term in office. The meeting did, however, underline Europe's divisions and impotence. Europe has been sidelined and their self-esteem is badly bruised. The US would, in essence, leave Europe to their own delusions, which would be calamitous for the Brussels autocracy. Yet, far more consequential than most of the happenings of the past few days was when Trump, speaking with Fox News after attending Daytona, dismissed Zelensky's canard of Russia wanting to invade NATO countries. Quote, I don't agree with that. Not even a little bit, Trump retorted.
Mhm.
Trump does not buy into the primary lie intended as the glue which holds this entire EU geopolitical structure together. For without the Russia threat, without the US believing in the globalist linchpin lie, there can be no pretense of Europe needing to prepare for war with Russia. Europe ultimately will have to come to reconcile its future as a periphery in Eurasia.
Yep, and I think that's the end of the article.
Alrighty.
So the point being, the final point being, I think, which is kind of implicit, is without the threat of Russia, what is the reason for the continued existence, okay, of NATO?
Exactly. Now I got to step out. I got to get my show ready. I'll
Okay,
see
I
you.
know. I think what I'll do is I'll take some comments. Okay, then I'll come over to join you, and I'll bring the third article.
Okay, we'll start off with that one then.
Okay, let us start off with that one. That's the article about the Hezbollah funeral
Okay.
by Pepe Escobar. It's a tremendous article.
Alrighty. I'll see you in a bit.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Bye. Okay, so here we are. Hi, guys. Like, these are authentic concerns, not uh, Lana just got out of her show. Evelina says, Cowboy Kitty says, Joe D. Evelina says the hypocrisy is so evident, just like sanctioning Cuban officials and foreign leaders for underpaid labor of the 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 uh, uh, the the Cuban medical brigades. So U.S. oligarchs censor editorials, but they blame the Europeans for censorship. Yeah, I know that's so hypocritical. It's so hypocritical. Lana says, "Hi all, just out of my health plan Zoom call. We are planning a lobby day. Congratulations, that's wonderful." Evelina says, who is going to believe the government is concerned about censoring Americans or Europeans, or truly concerned about Cuban doctors? I don't know. I don't believe that. Earl Rory says, hi, guys. Hi, Steve. Evelyn says, like, these are authentic concerns, not. And Steve says, hi, Earl. So I think that's going to do it for us tonight. Dee's show will be on at 9:15. It's 9:12 now. So I will be ending this, and I will be going on to join her. The name of the show is Around the World with Dee and Friends. So if you'll come and join us there, we will also cover the third of our topics, which is based on an article by Pepe Escobar. The title is The Funeral That Sealed Hezbollah's Unbreakable Covenant by Pepe Escobar. That's a very significant article for what's going on in the Middle East right now. And as Dee said, we'll start off her program with that article. Okay, so good night for now. I will be back on Saturday for sure. Steve Wolfburn calls for Lana to let him know about the healthcare lobby. Yes, indeed. Okay, thank you all for coming again. And as I said, I will see you on Saturday at 9 p.m.